Yes.
Well, they said the only thing that'll take away arthritis is bee stings.
Right.
And they actually have bees that you go to a doctor and they'll have the bee sting you.
And they
They,
have
they
this-
breed them,
Right.
you know, with a sterile environment.
Yeah.
And then they put them on, they take them with a forceps and they stick them on you and they sting you. And people get this therapy for weeks and months and then their arthritis goes away.
But there's a weed in Germany, and it's called a nettle, a burning nettle.
Stinging nettle.
Yes. And people hit themselves with that for the arthritis.
You can drink nettle tea, it's very good for kidneys, it's got a lot of benefits, I have a big bag of it at home.
Yeah, my mother, he had never seen it before, because my mother, you know, she said, must have said, she made him pick up a whole
No,
bunch
no,
of.
she picked it up and said, give me your arm. And I gave her my arm and she slapped it across and it went blisters all over the place.
Yeah.
Why'd she do it?
She's vindictive and mean and
Oh, I
horrible.
thought it was gonna help you with something.
No.
No, she just wanted to hurt people.
Oh, okay.
Her
We used
mother
to
loved to abuse
walk
people.
along this path when I was a kid, and she would say something, and if I would talk against it, she would push me into the nettle. I know. You never knew what was coming your way. But half my life with my mom, I would just go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so one day I really ducked, and she hit her hand on the stove bed. You know, we had one of those old-fashioned stoves that had a bar, a glass bar in front of it, they hung the towels. And so she broke her wrist.
Because she was going for you when you went down and she, oh my gosh.
And my father was holding me and saying, I'm so sorry, I feel so bad for you. And I said, yeah, but she went to the doctor, and he goes, oh honey, you don't know what's gonna happen when she comes back. And she did. I got such a beating with the cast. It's like, he could not control her. But she was just, that was her.
Did you start the camera?
Okay, I will message Kirsten and see if I can get her phone number, right?
I'm going inside, the guy's waiting by the elevator.
Get in the elevator with another white guy.
Welcome to our Tuesday night Bible study, 7:30, everybody. I welcome everybody up there on YouTube. We're continuing our study, or really discussion, in Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan. And there's also the workbook and journal. Rabbi still has, what, two books? And
I have one of
workbook?
each.
Yeah, one of each, okay. So if anyone needs them, come pick it up, put the money in the deductible box. I think it's $11 for the book, $11.50 for the workbook. We are in some chapter, we'll find out.
Yeah.
All right, so here's, hopefully all your blood's not in your stomach right now, because you gotta do a little bit of thinking before we begin. All right, which order is the correct one?
We don't know.
Obedience and then trust? Or trust first, then obedience, or they both work in parallel?
Trust first.
Let's see. Raise your hands if you think it's number 2. Raise your hand if you think it's number 1. And raise your hand if you think it's, they both work in parallel.
Who thinks it's off?
Okay, Rabbi, focus. Which one is it?
Food ministry.
Food ministry, oh yeah, food focus, okay. Yeah, I think it's trust first, and with trust comes obedience, in my opinion.
Well, you have to have faith and then comes obedience, right? So trust would come as part of faith.
Faith, okay.
You're not gonna obey something you don't believe in.
Correct, yeah. All right, so we're in chapter 5. Child abuse and bullying. Such a bully. Bullying. Everyone heard that word bullying over the last 10 years? Such a bully. All right, keep this in mind before we start reading. Oh, gosh, come on. Again, it's out of order. It's in order when I put it in, but if for some reason the presentation doesn't Does the critic have a point on the moral problems raised by? All right, never mind.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said, which is first, trust or obedience.
All right, okay. Has anyone you know ever raised concerns over this passage in Genesis? Are we in Genesis 22?
That was last week, I thought, the binding of Isaac.
Mhm.
Uh-oh.
That's the Akedah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that last week, right?
Yeah. Did you pull up the wrong one?
No, let's talk about
You
22.
got bullied
Just
in
talk-
another.
just talk
Oh,
about
yeah, we
22.
started 22, that's right. We
Oh,
didn't
so it's still on 22?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whew, good, okay.
It's your study, you should know what's in your chapter.
I was at the beach drinking mimosas and pina coladas. The test was never about, okay, core principles. The test was never about harm. God's intention was not to have Isaac killed, but to test Abraham. Wait a second, let's go back. All right. All right, let's keep this in mind. Has anyone you know ever raised concerns over this passage? This is Genesis 22. How did the discussion go?
I did, because my sermon on the Akedah starts with, what if you knew somebody wanted to tie up their kid, slice his throat and burn him? Would you call Child Protective Services? And they're all like, yeah.
Does the critic have a point on the moral problems raised by this narrative? In what way? Again, these are questions at the end, but we give it to you in advance so you can just think about it as we go through reading through it. Contrast Abraham versus Moses. Faith versus and the lack thereof. As we look at Genesis 22, what stands out to you as you grapple with the command of God to Abraham? How does the New Testament shed light on God's command to Abraham? How does the New Testament bring more clarity to the moral questions raised in chapter 22? All right, key insights into this chapter. This is my key to read from the book, workbook. All right, key insights. No, this is chapter 5. All right, this chapter addresses one of the most controversial stories. We won't use stories, we'll use historical accounts. This chapter addresses one of the most controversial historical accounts in the Old Testament. God's command for Abraham to sacrifice his son, Isaac. Critics often cite this as divine child abuse or bullying, but Paul Copan challenges that interpretation. He emphasizes that the account is not about a cruel test, but about trust, covenant, and God's ultimate intention to not have Isaac harmed. The story points forward to the theme of substitution and the end of child sacrifice. God intervenes, providing a ram, and demonstrates that he is not like the pagan gods who demanded child sacrifice. So who do we very well know did child sacrifices in the Old Testament? What were their names? They were one of the ites, but which one?
Canaanites.
Yeah, the Canaanites. The narrative also underlines Abraham's faith and God's faithfulness and covenantal promises. All right, that was key insights. Core principles. The test was never about harm. God's intention was not to have Isaac killed, but to test Abraham's faith and allegiance. Contrast to paganism. Unlike pagan deities, Yahweh halts the sacrifice, signaling his disapproval of child sacrifice. Foreshadowing the gospel. The story prefigures God's own future sacrifice in Messiah, reinforcing the substitution theme. Faith in the faithful God. Abraham trusted God's promise even when it seemed contradictory. Theological narrative, not ethical blueprint. This passage is about redemptive history, not a moral example to imitate.
People do that all the time too.
What's that?
Imitate the Bible. We just saw a pastor in Missouri of a non-denominational church, and he just took his second wife, and she's having his 8th child because he said everybody in the Bible was married, and God never said anything about having more than one wife. I'm like, where do you, how do you read this stuff?
And where does it say you are allowed to?
Well, and people, so, you know, I was quoting like, well, you know, it does say you have to be the husband of one wife in order to be a leader, and God said a man will take a wife and cleave to her. But, you know, because people in the Bible had more than one wife, everyone seems to think that's a golden ticket to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So I'll be looking for it now.
All right, so we'll read,
Me and him were thinking the same way.
I think we read this last time, but we'll read Genesis 22. After these things, God tested Abraham. So that's the right word. It's not
No, it was
tempted. Yeah,
tested.
some say tempt. Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
tested.
tested.
Abraham. And said to Abraham, and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey, and I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you." And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knives. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac and his son and laid him on the altar, top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out in his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." What interesting play of word, because he said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God." So he fears what? "Seeing you have withheld your son, your only son, from me."
Okay.
So who's the angel of the Lord?
And he also calls him a
Well-
boy, and he was 30 years old.
Yeshua.
Yeah, Yeshua, the pre-incarnate Yeshua. And Abraham, but it's interesting, he says you not fear God, right? It doesn't, and then he says you fear your only son from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided."
So you have the 3 days in that story.
Mhm.
You have the
3 days.
substitutionary offering. You
Yeah.
have the, you did not withhold your son, your only son,
Yeah.
from me, because he's going to offer his son. And the lamb, or the ram, is caught in the thicket by a crown of thorns. And Yeshua was wearing a crown of thorns when he was taken.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many things going on. And the Lord will provide. I know everyone says Jehovah Yireh, God, which really means God will see. But it means God will see what is needed and will provide what is needed, which is why it comes out that way. But Jehovah Jireh means the Lord will see, not really the Lord will provide.
All right, so we looked at this, I think, last week a little bit. So in some older versions, it says he tempted, but it's really the Hebrew word would translate to tested. So if anyone ever uses a translation where it says tested or tempted, be sure that
It's tested.
yeah, that it's tested. It's this word here. Naka, nasa.
Messiah.
Primitive root to test by implication to attempt.
I asked Greg if he could turn those lights out, just those.
Wrong ones. Is gonna
If Greg is on this side, there you go.
There you go.
All right, so let's begin reading. Sorry, all the blood's on my stomach right now. It's ate too much. So I'm struggling here. All right, so we're going to read chapter 5. child abuse and bullying, God's way and the binding of Isaac.
You started that last week, right?
Yeah, we just read this right now, yep, so we won't read that. So we'll go to page 43. Okay, occasionally we'll read in newspapers or hear on the evening news about certain deluded persons who've murdered someone. Their justification, God told me to do it. I've heard some use this line to justify divorcing a spouse in order to marry their personal assistant at work.
Yep.
God's name gets dragged into circumstances or actions that are wholly contrary to his good character. He certainly doesn't want the credit in such cases. Now, so what do we do with Abraham's startling command to Abraham in Genesis? Can you guys hear? Am I on?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Did you turn it on? Are you on mute?
I don't know what I am. I
Look
don't
at
know what
your-
I'm on.
Look at your.
I'm on comatose.
Oh, yeah, okay, there we go.
Man.
All the blood's in my stomach. It's your fault, Herta. All right.
What, because I provide?
Because she provided a really delicious meal,
The herder will provide.
which you can't taste when you're watching behind the computer. You have to be here in person. All right, so what do we do with God's startling command to Abraham in Genesis 22:2? Take now your son, your only son whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering. As we'll discuss later in this book, the law of Moses condemned child sacrifice. In fact, this was one of the horrible practices for which God judged the Canaanites. So then, doesn't it seem that God commands are whimsical and capricious in Genesis 22?
No. Not at all.
Why can't God just as well command murder as prohibited? I'm sorry. Why can't God just as well command murder as prohibited? After all, it looks like he's doing just that to Abraham. This is what one biblical scholar calls a monstrous test. The best-selling author Bart Ehrman, an agnostic, do you know where he teaches? I think it's North Carolina. Comments on the Akedah, or binding of Isaac. And he quotes, the idea that suffering comes as a test from God simply to see if his followers will obey is illustrated perhaps more clearly and more horribly in the offering of Isaac. Some scholars claim that Abraham failed the test by being willing to sacrifice his son. Others wonder how this act could serve as a test for godliness. Should Abraham be loved or hated for what he did? The Danish Christian philosopher, so that's a little contradiction here. Christian, again, what's philosophy? The love of man's wisdom. So the Danish Christian man who loves man's wisdom, Soren Kierkegaard, had a lot to say about this portion of Scripture. Abraham had a right to be a great man and thus to do what he did. But when another does the same, it's a sin, a heinous sin. Kierkegaard said that God's command to Abraham suspended typical ethical obligations. God appears to use his authority to violate basic moral standards. God seems to be a relativist of sorts. If we look at the bigger picture, perhaps we can place some of these troubling matters in proper context. Only then should we look at specifics in Genesis 22. All right, the broader context. The theme of the Pentateuch, Abraham's faith and Moses' unbelief. Biblical scholars have pointed out that the theme of faith holds the Pentateuch, that's Genesis to Deuteronomy, together at its seams. The two major players are Abraham and Moses. Abraham is the positive example of faith, while Moses is God appears to use his authority to make, that was said earlier. Abraham is a positive example of faith, while Moses is the negative example. Abraham had faith without the law of Moses, which was given at Mount Sinai. Now, despite his wavering, he trusted God's promise, and so he was declared righteous by God. That was in Genesis 15:6. By contrast, Moses actually failed in his faith. Even though he lived under the law given at Sinai. Yes, he played a crucial role in Israel's history, but we see a critical failure of faith in Moses. A little behind you, sorry. Abraham is a positive example of faith. Moses is a negative example of faith. Okay, Abraham had faith without the law of Moses, which is given to Mount Sinai. Despite his wavering, he trusted God's promise, and so he was declared righteous by God. By contrast, Moses actually failed in his faith, even though he lived under the law given at Sinai. Yes, he played a crucial role in Israel's history, but we see a critical failure of faith in Moses. So it's no coincidence that when, quote, have faith, believe is mentioned in the Pentateuch, it is used positively before the giving of the law at Sinai in Exodus 20. So we see this in Genesis 15:6, Exodus 4, verse 5, chapter 14, verse 31, and chapter 19, verse 9. Let's try to see where this is here. Okay. However, these words are used negatively, did not believe, after Sinai. Numbers 14:11, Numbers chapter 20, verse 12, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 32, chapter 9, verse 23. The Pentateuch is in a large part a contrast between Abraham and Moses. Though Abraham's faith wavered at times, it continued to grow. It's significant that Abraham trusted God and was declared righteous before the law of Moses came. Even without the law, Abraham kept the intention or purport of the law because he lived by faith. Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Genesis 26, verse 5. Notice the words used. These are post-Sinai law terms used in Deuteronomy. Obeyed, charge, commandments, statutes, laws. Yet they applied to Abraham before the law was given. The point is to show how Abraham essentially kept the law and pleased God because he lived by faith. That's Genesis 15, verse 6. This connection wasn't lost on Paul in the New Testament. You see this in Romans 4 and Galatians chapters 3 and 4. As he reread the scriptures in light of his encounter with Messiah, he discovered that Abraham lived by faith and was declared righteous by God. Now that's Genesis 15. In Genesis 17 came the covenant of circumcision, and over 400 years later the law was given at Sinai. In other words, Abraham didn't need circumcision or the law to be right with God. Now on the other hand, Moses had the law, but he failed in his faith. This prevented him from entering the land across the Jordan. He is a negative contrast to Abraham. Though Moses had the law, he died in the wilderness because of his and Aaron's lack of faith at Kadesh. Numbers 20. So what happened in this instant, Numbers 20? Who can summarize why the Lord would not permit him to enter the promised land? What had happened?
He struck the rock.
But what was the command from the Lord to do with the rock?
To say to
Yeah,
the
just speak to it, that's right. Moses was barred from the promised land just because he struck a rock. He had struck rocks before. The Hebrew text makes clear that both Moses and Aaron displayed unbelief in their exasperation. They weren't trusting in God. Moses, along with Aaron, apparently cried out in frustration, "Listen now, you rebels, shall we," notice,
took
"shall
God's
we
glory.
bring forth water for you out of this rock?" Numbers 20:10. How about someone go to Psalms 106 and let's look at what verses 32 and 33 say. It reinforces Numbers chapter 20, verse 10. Psalm 106, verses 32 and 33.
They angered him also at the waters of strife, so that it went ill with Moses on account of them. because they rebelled against his spirit, so that he spoke rashly with his lips.
Thank you. The rebellion of the people prompted Moses to speak rashly, not act rashly. Rash words came from Moses' lips. That's what the NIV says. So because of the unbelief of both Moses and Aaron, God rebuked both of them. Because you, Moses and Aaron, the pronoun is plural, have not believed me to treat me as holy before Israel, you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. This number is chapter 20, verse 12. Later in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 51, we read again that at Meribah in Kadesh, Moses broke faith with God. As a result of this failure of faith, Moses couldn't enter the promised land. God used Abraham as a picture of trust without the benefit of the law. Abraham serves as an illustration across the ages of how God's people should live. Moses turns out to be a negative example and a sobering reminder to legalistically minded Jews that having the law and keeping it scrupulously are inadequate for being right with God. Rather, we're to approach him trustingly, depending on his grace and sufficiency, rather than putting confidence in our own sufficiency. This important theme of Abraham's deep trust in God's promise and faithfulness helped shape Israel's own self-understanding and identity. So it's not surprising to hear Moses' words to Israel at Sinai. Do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test. The Hebrew verb is nasa. You, in order that the fear, yirah, of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin. Exodus 20:20. These two key verbs link back to Genesis 22. Abraham was tested by God. We see that in Genesis 22:1. And through this ordeal demonstrate his fear of God. Abraham's obedience is intended to serve as a model for Israel and to inspire Israel's obedience and solidify their relationship with, that is, fear of God. In fact, one can make the case that the entire Pentateuch speaks to the success of faith in Abraham and the failure of faith in Moses, despite having God's law. So to focus only on God's single command to offer up Isaac misses the big picture. Now, the context of Abraham's call. Now let's take a look at how God begins dealing with Abraham in light of his overarching plan for Israel. Let me go to this next slide. So I have this. Okay. If we do so, we'll have a firmer grasp of what is going on with Abraham and Isaac. Otherwise, we'll likely distort the story in Genesis 22. All right, the first time God told Abraham to go was when he left his home in Ur of the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, to go to the land which I will show you, Genesis 12:1. This remarkable act of trust was based on this promise that God would make through him and his descendants a great nation. We see this in Genesis 12, verses 2 and 3. But in Genesis 22:2, God commanded Abraham once again to go, using the same construction, literally, go, followed by the familiar sounding to one of the mountains of which I will tell you. Indeed, he is to go to the land or region of Moriah. This time Isaac, the covenant son of promise, is involved. Abraham couldn't have missed a connection being made. Bells are going off in Abraham's mind. God is clearly reminding him of his promise of blessing in Genesis 12, even while he's being commanded to do so, what seems to be utterly opposed to that promise. In chapter 12, God had promised he would make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars. After Abraham's obedience here, God confirms his promise that he will make his offspring as numerous as the stars and the sand on the seashore. Genesis 22:17. Genesis makes a connection between Abraham's call, Genesis 12, and his subsequent obedience. We see this in Genesis 22. The firmness of faith of Abraham, the father of Israel, was being tested, and this moment would shape the thinking and identity of subsequent generations of Israelites. As one Bible scholar wrote, quote, any Israelite who heard the story would take it to mean that his race owed its existence to the mercy of God and its prosperity to the obedience of their ancestor. Abraham left his home in Ur and given up his past for the sake of God's promise. Now he was being asked if he would trust God by apparently surrendering his future as well. Everything Abraham ever hoped for was tied up in this son of promise. The near context, Hagar and Ishmael. Here we come to the more immediate narrative context, namely what took place in Abraham's first son Ishmael and his mother Hagar. The Ishmael story turns out to be the preliminary testing ground that informs Abraham's later experience. Let's not forget that Ishmael was born to Hagar, Sarah's maidservant. Sarah, with Abraham, assumed that her having a biological son of promise in her old age wasn't going to work out. We see this in Genesis 16, verses 1 through 4. So Sarah, figuring that surrogate motherhood must be the way God wanted to fulfill his promise, told Abraham to take Hagar as her substitute as a second-tier wife. This, however, turned out to be an ill-conceived plan and misconception. We'll talk about this verse later in future chapter. When Hagar conceived and began to despise her mistress, Sarah, this caused much tension and Sarah drove her away. Yet God met Hagar in her desperation in the wilderness and told her to go back to live with Sarah and Abraham. There Hagar gave birth to Abraham's first son. As Ishmael grew up, Abraham unquestionably became quite attached to his son. God, however, had different plans. He assured Abraham and Sarah that he wanted the son of promise to come from both of their bodies, not just Abraham. So what word should come to mind when we read this? Come from both their bodies. What do we see in Genesis chapter 2? What's it say about yeah, but he uses the word echad, right? They're one, right? So they're one. So it implies both their bodies. Through God's miraculous fulfillment of his promise, Isaac was born. But at the feast held when Isaac was weaned, Ishmael, now a teenager, mocked Isaac. We see this in chapter 21, verse 9. It had been painful enough for Sarah to have her handmaiden, Hagar, rather than herself, give birth to Abraham's first son. But for Ishmael to then scorn Sarah's own biological child was just too much to take. Sarah wanted to send away not only Ishmael, but also his mother Hagar. This creates now a dilemma for Abraham. This is chapter 21, verse 11. Sending him off would calm Sarah down, but sending Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness meant encountering harsh circumstances and risks, possibly even death. But God allayed Abraham's fears, reassuring him that Ishmael wouldn't die. In fact, Yahweh had already told him, I will make him a great nation. I wonder what that word great means in Hebrew, because he's talking about the Ishmaelites, which would be the Muslims, the Arabs.
What verse?
This is in chapter 17, verse 20. I suspect great means like a large nation, not like great, like they're awesome, and I just suspect it means large. Like a great mega nation.
Let's see. 17.
20?
Yeah, 20.
Yeah, 1720.
I will make him a great nation. Where's our Hebrew speaker? Alex.
He's not here.
Flying around somewhere.
Let's see. 17:20.
It's interesting how Ishmael's descendants outlasted Esau, the Edomites.
Let's see. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make fruitful him, and I will multiply him with every very 10 princes he shall father, and I will make him to nation great. So the word there is gadol, as in giant or large.
Okay, large. It means a big. number-wise, yeah,
got
okay.
gold, yeah.
Okay. Hagar herself had been told that God would greatly multiply her descendants. So Abraham could confidently send Ishmael away with Hagar and trust them to God's care. Now, I know we talked about this last time, but we know what in the Quran, Surah 2, they identify themselves as Ishmaelites, right? The Muslims do.
Mhm.
It says right there, it's like in verse 120 or so, somewhere there. And trust them to God's care. Then we come to God's command to Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. Abraham had endured a difficult challenge regarding Ishmael, and he was aware of the promise God had made concerning Ishmael. Though Abraham had sent Ishmael away to the wilderness, God had promised that he would live and become a large nation. Without God's promise, Abraham would have been wrong to send Hagar and Ishmael away to almost certain death. So despite Sarah's anger at Hagar and Ishmael, God assured Abraham that he would provide for Ishmael and that Abraham need not worry that he was doing wrong. God would care for Ishmael and Hagar and would fulfill his promises to them. So Abraham rose early in the morning, we see this in chapter 21, verse 14, just as he would do with Isaac, and sent them both away. Now in the background was not only God's assurance regarding Ishmael, God had also provided a miracle to Abraham, a son who had come from Sarah's own body, your only son. See this in Genesis chapter 22, verse 2. This long-awaited son of promise would also become a great nation. Ishmael had been a preliminary
Really sent
test.
Sarah,
Isaac would bring an even greater test.
and Ishmael had been sent away.
Abraham knew that God would fulfill his promise regarding Isaac, but he didn't know what God would do in the end. All he could do was trust God's promise and obey. Somehow God had to come through. Abraham's obedience, we now see, was carried out in the context of his awareness of God's earlier deliverance of Ishmael and of God's act of providing the miracle child of promise through Sarah. All right, the text of Genesis 22. Having looked at the surrounding biblical text, we can hone in on Genesis 22. This text contains additional clues, some of them subtle, to help us better understand what takes place in this powerful, perplexing narrative. Because Abraham already knew God's faithful and even tender character and promises. He was confident that God would somehow fulfill his promise to him. However, this would be worked out. So 4 things about God's character emerge as we work through Genesis 22. First, we're immediately tipped off to the fact that God is testing Abraham. Verse 1. God doesn't intend for Isaac to be sacrificed. No, Abraham isn't yet aware of what the reader knows. Not only that, this is only a test. Second, even the hard command to Abraham is cushioned by God's tenderness. God's directive is unusual. Now, I don't see this part here in any translations. Please take your son. Or as another scholar translates it, take, I beg of you, your only son. God is remarkably gentle as he gives a difficult order. So Rabbi, when you read the Hebrew, is that the impression that comes, that it's a soft type of command?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering why you put this in here. That's why I bring that up. Okay, God is remarkably gentle as he gives a difficult order. This type of divine command as a plea is rare. So I don't see that in the translation that it comes out as a plea. It seems like it's a command.
Well, he uses the word na.
Which
Take
means-
na, et your son. So the word na is like, you would translate it as please, although it doesn't really have a good translation.
Okay, but it's, okay.
So when you see the word na, many people translate it as please. So God's saying, okay, please take your son, your only son.
Okay.
But it's not that, because if they really believed that word meant please, na, then
Yeah.
you would see that it would say, and God said, please take your son.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say that. He
But
says, take your son, your only son.
But would you say it's a more gentle approach? I don't want to use the word approach when you're talking about God, but is it a gentler delivery? A gentler command?
I don't see it as that.
Okay.
But
All right,
I'm also not a Hebrew scholar in
Okay.
that respect, but the word na is there, and so sometimes it's translated as please, but
okay, that's where they come up with.
Lavakashah is please,
Okay,
so I don't know where they get this as please,
all right.
nah.
Isaac.
Isaac.
Oh, Isaac.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And he was after these things, and God said, he tested Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am, please, son of you, only one of you, whom you love, Isaac, and go. So, I mean, that's how it is written in the Hebrew,
Okay.
but that's only if na means please, which,
Okay.
again,
Right.
if they really believe that, it would be in the English translation.
Okay. All right, this type of divine command as a plea is rare. Old Testament commentator Gordon Wenham sees here a hint that the Lord appreciates the costliness of what he is asking. God understands the magnitude of this difficult task. In fact, one commentator states that God is not demanding here. Thus, if Abraham couldn't see God's broader purposes and so couldn't bring himself to do this, he wouldn't incur any guilt in declining God's plea. Now, a third indication of God's good character highlights his faithfulness. God reminded Abraham of, quote, your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac. Verse 2. God's covenant acknowledgement is apparent. The divine promise to Abraham can't be fulfilled without Isaac. Abraham is struggling to keep two things in mind. His deep love for Isaac is good and right, and the circumstances surrounding Isaac's birth clearly show that God was fulfilling his covenant promise to Abraham. While this is the most fearful and dreadful thing Abraham would ever have to do, he is trying to come to terms with just how God would fulfill his promise through Isaac. Now, a fourth reminder of God's faithful character is that God is sending Abraham to a mountain in the region of Moriah, derived from the Hebrew word ra'ah, provide, see, show. As we noted earlier, the place which I will tell you is linked back to God's initial call to Abraham, go to the land which I will show you. Abraham was also aware of God's provision for Hagar and Ishmael when they first fled. Hagar said, using the same Hebrew word ra'ah, you are a God who sees. You see this in Genesis 16, verse 13. So in the very word Moriah, provision, we have a hint of salvation and deliverance. Wenham hopefully observed salvation is thus promised in the very decree that sounds like annihilation. In all these ways, we see God's faithful tenderness cushioning the startling harsh of God's command. It's as though God is saying to Abraham, I'm testing your obedience and allegiance. You don't understand, but in light of all I've done and said to you, trust me. Not even death can nullify the promise I've made. God himself told Abraham that it wasn't Hagar who would bear the child of promise, even though Abraham with Sarah thought it would be a good idea. Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. You see this in Genesis 17, verse 18. God replied, no, but Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. So God assured Abraham that Isaac, not Ishmael, was the promised son. So we can't separate God's promise in Genesis 12 and 17 from God's gentle command in Genesis 22. Abraham had the confidence that even if the child of promise died, God would somehow accomplish his purpose through that very child. Abraham believed God could even raise Isaac from the dead. All right, let's pause here about this. Abraham believed God could even raise Isaac from the dead. Where does he get this? Where else do we see this about the resurrection? We did a study on it. Remember Job, verse 19, it says, oh, even though I die in this flesh, I will see him with my own eyes. So this apparently was something that had to have been passed down from Adam down to Noah, down to his sons. Because where else would he get this? Again, if we consider the book of Jasher Apocrypha or historical, it says that I believe before Abraham went to the land of the Canaanites, he studied under, who was the son, Noah's son, where the Messiah would come? Was it Shem? I think from Shem, yeah. He went to learn from him. At least that's what it says in the book of Jasher. All right, so we move on. Abraham believed God could even raise Isaac from the dead. That's why Abraham told his servants before he headed to Mount Moriah with Isaac, we will worship and then we will come back to you. So how many went up to that mountain?
2.
Yeah, 2. How many were total that left? 4. No, there were 2 servants, right? Two young men. And then Abraham and Isaac. We will worship and then we will come back to you. No wonder the author of Hebrews observed that since Abraham had received the promises, he considered that God is able to raise people even from the dead. We see this in Hebrews 11, 17, 19. In some ways, God would fulfill his promise. Abraham was confident of this and commended for it. After all, Abraham confidently affirmed a few chapters earlier, shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? Genesis 18:25. So Abraham knew that God's faithful character meant that God wouldn't break his promise. Not only is it impossible for God to lie, but after promising to make Abraham into a great nation and to bring his descendants into the promised land, God himself passed between the pieces of animals in a dramatic display of pyrotechnics. We see this in Genesis 15, 17. According to some scholars, this puzzling gesture of cutting a covenant indicates a self-curse. May I be like this cut up animal if I don't fulfill my promise. Someone go to Jeremiah chapter 34 and read verse 18. I want to read what this passage is about. May I be like this cut up animal if I don't fulfill my promise.
And I will give the men who have transgressed my covenant, who have not performed the words of the covenant which they made before me, when they cut the calf in two and passed between the parts of it.
Okay. Whatever divine self-curse might mean, it shows how supremely dedicated God was to keeping his covenant. Philosophical reflection on God's command to Abraham. If Abraham was commanded to take an innocent life, should we revise the 6th commandment, ye shall not murder? We're left with a question, couldn't taking an innocent life ever be morally permitted? So now consider the following statements. 1, God's command to do X obligates person Y to do X. 2, it is wrong to kill innocent human beings. 3, God commanded Abraham to take an innocent life. Can we hold all 3 of these statements with consistency? We can accept statement 1 that we should do what a good God commands. After all, God's commands are rooted in his good nature and purposes. On the other hand, statement 2 normally holds, but we must consider the specific context to see whether it always holds. Apart from God's command, could it be that under certain conditions, taking an innocent life might be morally justified? Take the specific case of ectopic pregnancy. The fertilized human egg remains and grows in the woman's fallopian tube. If the embryo continues to grow without intervention, the mother will surely die. Ethicists generally agree that in this tragic case, it is morally permissible to take an innocent human life. The reason given is a self-defense argument. In order to protect the mother's life, without intervention, both will die. Now take September 11 terrorist attacks. When 4 planes were hijacked, putting many more lives at risk than those of the innocent passengers, the president gave orders to shoot down the planes, which had suddenly become weapons. Again, while tragic, such a command was justified in an attempt to stop the killing of many more innocent persons. These exceptional cases permit the taking of innocent human life. All things being equal, such actions would be morally permissible. But let's explore further. What if the world of humans turned out to be different from the way we happen to find it? The philosopher John Hare provides this thought experiment. What if God rearranged the world so that it had different features and thus different ways to apply moral principles? Say that God willed that at the age of 18 humans should kill each other, but that God would immediately bring them back to life and in robust health. In that case, killing people at this age wouldn't be a big deal, or at least that big a deal. Yes, in this world, dead people stay dead. We're setting aside supernatural intervention, of course. That is one of the reasons that killing innocent people in the actual world is wrong. Now let's shift to the unique historical setting of Genesis 22. We've seen that the narrative context of Genesis reveals repeated divine assurance and confirmations that Isaac was the child of promise, an instrument of blessing to the nations. Abraham truly knew that Isaac would live to adulthood and have offspring in fulfillment of God's promise. So if necessary, God would bring Isaac back from the dead. We will return, which is what he said. Abraham promised his servants. So if Abraham knew God would fulfill his covenant promise, then Abraham's taking innocent human life, in this case, according to God's command, was morally permissible. Keep in mind that our ethical understanding is partly shaped by certain facts about the world. If we lived in a world in which hitting people in the head helped improve their health rather than causing harm and pain, then such actions would be encouraged. Yes, in the actual world, hitting people in the head usually causes harm. However, this illustration shows that the command, don't hit people in the head, depends on certain givens in the world. If certain facts about the world were different, then the command wouldn't be binding on us. So what if the facts about the world include a good God who specifically reveals himself and may issue extraordinary commands in specific, unique context, and with morally sufficient reasons? Even if the critic believes the story of Abraham to be historically unreliable, that is irrelevant for our purposes. The critic's argument is based on the assumption that this event took place in accordance with the text. The critic's task then is to show why Abraham, given what he knew, shouldn't obey God's command. After all, Abraham knew the outcome. Taking Isaac's life would only mean that God would resuscitate him so that God's covenant promise would be fulfilled. Yes, without God's command, which assumes covenant promises, Abraham would have been murdering his son, but that's not what we have here. We've seen in statement 2, taking innocent human life is morally wrong, has its own set of exceptions. Again, ectopic pregnancy. Such exceptions aside, the critic wrongly assumes that this statement is absolutely correct while ignoring or rejecting certain truths about reality. He is ignorant of a supernatural being who is able to bring people back from the dead. He rejects the fact that God acts in history, makes promises, makes good on them, and has morally sufficient reasons for doing what he does. So statement 2 applies in a world in which dead people don't come back to life after being killed. So God's command wasn't immoral or contradictory. All right, now the New Testament perspective on Abraham and Isaac. Now Jesus as the second Isaac. Commenting on Genesis 22, Bart Ehrman observes, the God who had promised Abraham his son now wants him to destroy that son. The God who commands his people not to murder has now ordered the father of the Jews to sacrifice his own child. Yet as Caiaphas, the high priest, spoke better than he knew about Jesus, John 11:47-52, so Ehrman is speaking better than he knows without embracing the theological implications. Now let's back it up a bit, though, to put things into perspective. In his book, The Crucified God, German theologian Jürgen Moltmann quotes the Jewish writer Eli Wiesel, who powerfully wrote in his book, Night, on his own horrifying experiences at Auschwitz, the infamous Nazi concentration camp. Wiesel recounts one event that is particularly moving. Quote, the SS hanged 2 Jewish men and the youth in front of the whole camp. The men died quickly, but the death throes of the youth lasted for half an hour. Where is God? Where is he? Someone asked behind me. As the youth still hung in torment in the noose after a long time, I heard the man call again, where is God now? And I heard a voice inside myself answer, where is he? He is here. He is hanging there on the gallows. What is Moltmann's profound response to Wiesel's assessment? Any other answer would be blasphemy. The Christian takes strength and comfort in the fact that God suffers with us and even enters into our suffering, particularly in the person of Jesus of Nazareth on the shameful, humiliating cross. Indeed, a God who doesn't suffer would make God a demon, an indifferent God An indifferent God would condemn human beings to indifference as well. So the story of Abraham and his one and only son, Isaac, actually foreshadows God the Father's offering the redemptive sacrifice of the second Isaac, his one and only son. Rather than this being forced upon the son as divine child abuse, as Richard Dawkins calls it, the Father is not pitted against the Son. Christ willingly laid down his life and then took it up again. John 10, verse 15, and verses 17, 18. God sent his Son into the world to bear Israel and humanity's curse and alienation on the cross. Yet God, the Son himself, came into the world to save it. With three wills of Father, Son, and Spirit united as one, the triune God gave his very self to rescue and redeem humankind. God was a Messiah reconciling the world to himself. We see this written in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 19. All right, so Abraham's unquestioning yet difficult obedience to the covenant God not only helped shape and confirm Israel's identity in Abraham, but also provided a context for understanding God's and man's self-giving love in the gift of his son. When Abraham's dedication to God's command was confirmed, God said, "Now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Harking back to Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac, Paul uses this story to remind believers of God's supreme dedication to them. He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him over for all of us, how will he not also with him freely give us all things? Romans chapter 8:32. Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac anticipated God's self-sacrifice in Messiah. Abraham demonstrated his faithfulness to God, and God's sacrifice demonstrated his faithfulness to us. The kind of demand God made of Abraham was one of the triune God was willing to carry out himself. So deep is God's love for us. Romans 8, verses 31-32. That the late Scottish theologian Thomas Torrance was willing to go so far as to say, God loves us more than he loves himself. Isn't that what Mark used to say, Elder Mark? What's a sacrifice?
Yeah, if it doesn't cost you anything, it's not a sacrifice.
He said giving up something that's good
You
for
love-
something that's better.
Yeah, I think so. It's something.
Yeah, he said a lot of things. Well, does everyone know who Bart Ehrman is? I want you to know who he is, 'cause I know they quote him a lot in this book. I don't know why they do that, because he's not a believer. He graduated from Princeton Seminary in 1985, I think it was. He's like 70 years old now. But he believes that the Bible is a human book, not a divine book. He believes that there was a historical person named Jesus, but not divine. And he lost his faith because of the suffering in the world. So he doesn't believe that because there's suffering in the world that there can be a good God who is involved in our lives and everything like that. So I just want you to understand that when Bart Ehrman is talking about the Bible, he's talking about it as a book of history or a book written by man, but not divine inspiration of God and not inerrant in any way. And that he believes in the historical presence of Jesus, but not a divine nature of Jesus. So I don't want you to take anything he says as being truthful or gospel or anything like that, because he's certainly not a believer in God. I don't know why they keep using him. They call him a theologian. I guess he's an agnostic atheist, so I don't know why I guess that's a theology in some sense, but he's not. Yeah, don't take anything that he says as in, if he says it, it must be true, because he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
So I'm getting that theologians can be atheists and still give us
Apparently.
notes in the
Being
Bible.
an atheist is theology all by itself.
You just gotta look at this.
Well, but I mean, it even goes into like what's his, on the Bible, he believes the Bible is a human book with human mistakes, discrepancies, and biases. It was not written by God. On God, he identifies as an agnostic atheist, meaning he's agnostic about the existence of a greater power, but an atheist regarding the God of the Bible. So clearly he doesn't believe in God. On suffering, the problem of suffering was a major reason for the loss of faith, leading him to question how a benevolent, all-powerful God could allow so much pain and tragedy in the world. On Jesus, he argues that Jesus is a real historic person, but that he did not claim to be God, which clearly Jesus does claim to be God all over the place, nor did he teach about the kind of post-mortem reward and punishment that traditionally conceived. He clearly spoke about hell more than he spoke about heaven. And on his identity, while he no longer identifies as a Christian, he sometimes calls himself an agnostic atheist and admires Jesus' ethical teachings, which he tries to follow for different reasons other than traditionally understood by Christians. So, he's an idiot.
Sounds confused.
Yeah. Again, graduating from Princeton Theological Seminary, we know what Princeton has become, so there's no...
It was starting even back then.
Oh, yeah.
Because I had some friends I had a friend that went to Princeton, and he was in Brooke Shields' class, and, but they were, so I was up in Princeton in 1984, 1985.
Yeah.
So what do Princeton, Harvard, and Yale all have in common?
They all started as Christian colleges.
Now look where they are now. Okay. All right, what's the crucifixion divine child abuse? Dawkins, we've seen, considers the command for Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac as tantamount to child abuse and bullying. We've responded to this charge, but we should go further. Was the crucifixion an instance of divine child abuse? Does the crucifixion justify violence or perhaps passivity in the face of injustice? We see that the charge of abuse doesn't take into account the full scope of biblical evidence, as though crucifixion was forced on the Son. Consider 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 21 through 25. So to this you were called, because Messiah suffered for you, leaving you an example, that you should follow his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed, for you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. We have no passive victim here. Jesus' death on the cross was part of the predetermined plan of the triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit. Each was suffered in his own reconciling work. In weakness, Jesus actually conquered sin and the powers of darkness. See this in John chapter 12, verse 31, and Colossians 2, verse 15. According to John's Gospel, we've seen Jesus' moment of being lifted up or glorified comes in the hour of God's great humiliation. Rather than thinking of the crucifixion as the absence of God, with the darkening skies and the cry of dereliction, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is actually the moment when God's presence is most evident. God shows himself in the crucifixion through a palpable darkness, an earthquake, and the tearing of the temple curtain in two. Compare this event with the darkening skies thundering in God's voice in Mount Sinai. God's great moment in history comes when all seems lost, when God seems defeated. God's glory is revealed in God's self-humiliation. The crucifixion was no act of divine child abuse. It was the history-defining event in which God gave his very self for humanity's sake.
So what was the purpose of Abraham and Isaac? The whole thing about Abraham going through that whole ordeal with Isaac, what was the
crucifixion?
Absolutely. It was the foreshadowing of what, that's why we say that in the Passion and the Passover, you can see the crucifixion. Abraham, and the wording, the third day, his only son, your only son whom you love, the sacrifice, all that stuff was to point to the crucifixion so that we wouldn't miss it. It was to give us an example of the innocent for the guilty.
All right, so let's get to the study discussion questions. It's a little behind here on this slide, but oh well, that's water under the bridge. All right, discussion studies questions. Hey, out of order again.
How do you do that?
No, it's on the order when I put them. I go one, anyway. It's your internet.
No.
There's a lot of talk about Abraham's obedience and faith, but there's very little talk about Isaac's faith and obedience.
Yeah.
Well, again, that's the mirror of the crucifixion, because it says that he did not open his mouth and neither did Isaac. All the things you're seeing are parallels between the two.
You know, I think Rabbi brought up, we see he wasn't a little boy either, you know,
No,
usually when we
because-
thought he was a little toddler or a little,
No.
yeah, he was a full-grown
No, he
adult.
was- yeah.
He was at least 30,
Yeah,
He probably was the same age as Jesus.
Yep.
About.
roughly,
Good point.
but he was big enough to carry the wood, and the scripture doesn't say boy, it says Na'ar.
Certainly
Na'ar
big
is a
enough
young
to-
man of marriageable age.
Certainly big enough to say, I'm not gonna do that.
And right after that, in chapter 23, he gets married. So again, he's not a baby.
all right, discussion, study questions. Has anyone you know ever raised concerns over this passage in Genesis 22? How did the discussions go?
Isn't it read every year for Rosh Hashanah in the temple?
For Yom Teruah, yes.
Oh, Yom Teruah.
Rosh Hashanah.
Sorry.
Yes, it's read every year, and probably about every 2 or 3 years, I'll do a sermon on it for the Akedah, for the Yom Teruah service, but I don't think you want to hear the same sermon every year on the same day.
No, I'm just wondering what concerns are raised among Jews listening to that every year, who don't understand what it portends, what it points to.
Well, the Jews believe that because Abraham agreed to do this, that God no longer spoke to him after this. And because he was doing what pagans do, so they believe that he lost all favor with God after he agreed to sacrifice.
Really?
Really?
Mhm.
You think that,
I don't think it, they wrote it in the Talmud. They said that after these things, Abraham lost, and God lost his, God never spoke to Abraham again, so Abraham lost his blessings from God.
even though God's name is the God of Abraham?
You know, I'm just saying, you know, some of them rabbis just believe anything they want to believe if it fits their narrative. Yeah, again, and and God spoke to Isaac and Jacob too, saying the same thing. I give you this land as an inheritance, you and your seed after you. So he said the same thing to each of them. Yet the rabbis insist that God didn't speak to Abraham again because he offered Isaac as a sacrifice.
So where else do we see the name Abraham show up in the Old Testament? We see it in Exodus 3:14 when he says, I am the God of
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Jacob, okay.
He says, who are you, Lord? And he doesn't say, I am that I am first. He says,
Yeah.
I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.
Where else do we see Abraham's name come by? Not too much, not too many that I can think of.
Well, I mean, you'll often see it as I promised your father Abraham,
Yeah,
or,
okay.
you know, Father Abraham said this or something, but yeah, I mean, technically in one sense, God didn't speak to Abraham again directly
Right,
after
yeah.
this, but he did speak to his children.
So when was it before the sacrifice that he said he was considered righteous, right?
It was before the circumcision.
Oh, before the circumcision, okay, all right.
He was considered righteous.
All right, question 2, does a critic have a point in the moral problems raised by this narrative? In what way?
I mean, we can't sacrifice our children, I mean, even if we really want to. So, I guess in one way, there's a moral problem raised on, is it okay to sacrifice your children? But again, the Bible has many times where it teaches us what not to do and shows us how we can't do what they did in the Bible because it has problems.
The
You know-
consequences of what they're, yeah.
Yeah, like David brought the kingdom together, and God said, "Don't have foreign wives, because they'll take you away from me." And of course, Solomon had lots of wives and foreign wives and concubines, and of course he led them away from God, and they ended up losing the kingdom again. So, you know, just because they do it in the Bible doesn't mean we should do it in our life.
But people are doing it now, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was thinking a couple of years ago, there was the governor of Virginia, I call him Dr. Death, not Terry McAuliffe.
Yeah,
Wasn't it, was
Terry
it
McAuliffe.
the one who was a doctor, he says,
Yeah.
oh, I know how he can, you know,
You can just take the baby,
Baby
put
once
it
it's out.
aside. If it
Yeah.
lives, if it survives the abortion,
Right.
just set it aside until it dies.
And now look who they have.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, okay.
and we thought it couldn't get any,
Not worse.
worse,
Find a way.
yeah.
All right,
Yeah, there's a
so,
lot of moral problems that are all over the world, but the Bible will give you the answer to the moral problem if you take it in total context, not just one verse. Again, there's a lot of people like this pastor who just got his second wife saying that throughout the Bible people had more than one wife, so it's okay to do it.
Right.
But that's if you take a verse out of context. If you take all the verses together from the whole Bible, there's a pretty strong moral history there.
But also, like a lot of stories in the Old Testament, they're meant to illustrate a point.
Yep.
Like Samson, for example, and Delilah, and David.
All of them.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened? David had an affair with a married woman. He already had all these wives, he had all these concubines, and yet he had to have an affair with a married woman. And then to cover his affair, he killed the husband. I mean, this is a whole line of what not to do. So there's a lot of moral things in the scriptures that are there to teach us that we shouldn't do those things.
All right, contrast Abraham versus Moses, faith versus lack thereof. So when Abraham gave in to his wife's pleas to
Have a
have a
with
baby
Hagar.
through Hagar, was that?
That was the lack of faith.
Yeah, where would you put that? Okay, yeah, lack
I
of
would put it
faith.
as a lack of faith.
Yeah.
Because God definitely said it's gonna come through the two of you, and Sarah is like, no, that's not gonna happen, I'm 90 years old. So, I mean, there were times when Abraham wasn't the most faithful and wasn't the most upright. But again, God doesn't expect us to be perfect. He expects us to seek Him for forgiveness and repentance. So, all the way back to Adam and Eve, when they heard God coming in the cool of the morning and they hid themselves because they knew they were naked. And God's like, well, who told you were naked? Because you didn't know you were naked before, because you were naked always, but you didn't know it. And the reality of it is that we should go to God, not run and hide from God, especially when we have something going on that's sinful in our lives. We should take it to God, not try to hide it, because He already knows about it. So it's better just to hand it over to Him. But, so there were times when Abraham wasn't as faithful as he should have been. And there were times when Moses showed great faith. But I think the problem with Moses is when he hit the rock after God said, speak to the rock, and then he followed up with, do we have to do this?
Yeah.
Now the argument is, was he talking about him and Aaron, or was he talking about him and God? And the belief is that he was talking about him and God, as if God couldn't do these things without him. He got a little full of himself. So he ended up losing his chance to go to the promised land.
With great responsibility comes great what is it?
Great accountability.
Accountability, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so we know what happened to Moses. Where was he buried?
Don't know.
Mount Nebo.
Why, where else do we see this talked about? Jude, remember it says that the archangel Michael was
Yeah.
arguing with Satan over the body of Moses, and he said, the Yahweh rebuke you. Anyway, okay.
Well, because they would have used it as a
Yeah.
idol if they
Idol,
had the
yeah.
body, so.
Yeah.
Like Padre Pio, his blood is,
Like the Catholics use everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so moving on. As we look at Genesis 22, what stands out to you as you grapple with the command of God to Abraham?
Abraham, he didn't do it. I mean, the fact, I'm still stuck on, they think that God didn't like him anymore because he was gonna sacrifice his son. He was being obedient to God, and then he listened and he didn't slay the boy.
See, but we have the revelation in the New Testament that explains that. The rabbis don't, right? It just
No, it's
ends.
right there though in the story though,
Yeah.
he stopped, the ram was in the
Now I know
thicket.
that you fear God,
Fear God,
and
yeah.
there he saw a ram stuck in the
Okay,
thicket.
yeah.
So he didn't do it.
But they don't look at it going forward as to the sacrifice of, again, all the words, the 3 days,
intent.
the ram, the son,
The
the only
intent
love.
was there.
Do you think they knew it and they just tried to cover it up so people wouldn't follow it?
Look, ever since Jesus, they've had to try to do verbal gymnastics to get away from Jesus being the Messiah
In Torah.
in Torah.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. But I mean in Torah.
But I mean, especially in Torah, because that's where
Yeah.
the first signs were.
Yeah, so again, when you look at Abraham being obedient, he was if you look at every command that God gave to Abraham, he always said, "Here am I." Okay, so he always agreed with God that here I am, what would you like your servant to do, is basically what that means. Hineni, here am I to serve you. And so he went to the land, he did the things God told him to do. Along the way, he had a few missteps, like claiming Sarah was his sister and not his wife and stuff. But mostly he did everything he was supposed to do. And he was called Yadidya, the friend of God. So that was his Hebrew nickname, Yadidya, the friend of God. So I don't know, I mean, I don't have any problem with what Abraham did because he was being obedient to God. But that was at a time when God spoke directly to him. You know, if you know, someone says, hey, God wants you to murder that abortion doctor so he'll stop doing abortions. That's not how it works today.
And some people thought they heard that voice.
Who was that guy? Someone named Hill who killed the abortion doctor because he said God told him to kill the abortion doctor to stop the abortions. God's not going to tell you to commit a sin in order to stop a sin. He might tell you to witness to the doctor. He might tell you to protest the doctor. He might tell you you're going to go to jail for harassing the doctor, but you're not going to kill the doctor.
Nowadays, they just take people out. If they don't like what you say, they.
Oh, I know.
All right, so let's move on. So, you know, I'm still thinking about what you said, Amy. Like, how can the rabbi still think that he cast him aside because he doesn't talk to him anymore? I'm trying to think, how do you counteract that? But there's not a whole lot where Abraham comes up. But you said, right?
He still spoke to, God still spoke to Abraham's children,
Yeah,
Isaac and
okay,
Jacob.
yeah.
He made the same promise to them he made to Abraham.
Okay.
If he was done with Abraham, he would have been done with his kids.
Kids, okay.
I mean, how many chapters does Abraham get in, you know, like, I mean, he's like this much of he's important,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
he's-
12 to 22 gets 10 chapters, yeah. All right, so let's look at the other question. Now, how does the New Testament shed light on God's
Well,
command?
let me add this one thing.
Yeah, please.
God had used Abraham for what he needed him for.
Yeah.
Okay? He did everything through Abraham he needed to as to teach us what we needed to know. It's the same thing as what I tell Jewish people today. How long was the longest stretch of that time that God did not send you a prophet? Well, what happened at that time? Well, there was Jesus. Okay? So if God did everything if God said everything he had to say that Abraham could say for him, then he used Abraham to the point of he was finished needing Abraham as his surrogate. Just like he said everything he needed to say through Jesus, and that's why he's not sent another prophet to Israel. So if we can explain that to the rabbis is, okay, what happened 2,000 years ago that God has never sent another prophet? And then you do the same thing. Well, why did God stop speaking to Abraham? Because Abraham accomplished everything he needed to accomplish. His job was over. So God retired him. He went up to so that's the best as I can shed light on it for people to understand.
All right, so how does the New Testament shed light on God's command to Abraham? I think we see this in Hebrews, right?
Yeah, it was the
The Hall of Faith.
example of what it'll be like when God sends his son, his only son, to die on the cross for our sins. It's the innocent for the guilty.
And this
And it
fall.
says Abraham believed in the resurrection. It says he believed that God could do. I have the
Yeah,
verse
right.
Well, I mean, he had to. If Job believed in the resurrection, you would expect at least Abraham would.
Yeah.
So that would have been somewhat common knowledge
Yes.
to the peoples.
Although the resurrection that Abraham was thinking about was going to be instantaneous, as I'm going to go over there and sacrifice with the
that's
boy,
right.
and then
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
come right
yes,
back.
yeah,
Where we're still waiting for the resurrection.
yeah. Correct. Yeah.
To this day.
All right. How in follow up? How does the New Testament bring more clarity to the moral questions raised in chapter 22? So I mean, at least in your mind, have you formulated? If anyone ever makes some quip about, oh, he commands, he's a mean God, he commanded Abraham to kill his son. Do you kind of already have how to just briefly respond to that? Some people just say because they're not interested in your response, right? They just want to, what is it? Do machine gun fire, drive-by shooting, that's what they call it.
Yeah.
But just keep in mind.
I think, again, it shows the binding of Isaac, the Akedah shows the way God was going to redeem the world through his son. The sacrifice of his innocent son for us as the guilty party. So we're all Isaac, we're all guilty, and then here comes the lamb.
All right, so kind of in a bind here because we got 14 minutes left.
I got lots to say though.
Okay, good. So we won't go into chapter 6, that'll be next week.
That's right, you were quiet all day doing sermons.
So I was writing my sermon and I was supposed to get to stage 7, 8, and the 75-day interval, but I have to break off the 75-day interval to be its own sermon. So this week is just gonna be, stages, Jesus has come back, he's going to fight the battle of the campaign of Armageddon, and we're gonna see how that ends. So that'll be this week. Also, I need you to put December 16th on your calendar. December 16th. It's a Tuesday night.
What's happening?
I don't
So
know.
everybody who's coming to Bible study ought to be meeting us at Wheaton Plaza that night.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna do prayer and pizza, and we're gonna be, so we'll go up to, the mall from 6 to 8.
We don't have a whole lot of stuff to give away.
We'll go up to the mall from 6 to 8 and we'll give stuff away and witness to people and pass out tracts and that kind of stuff. We'll have the Spanish church go with us since 90% of the people up there speak Spanish and not English. And Paul, save all the cookies from that we're getting on Friday night so that we can have
This Friday night, okay.
So whatever Friday night, because and let's put them in the freezer,
Right.
and then we can use them and give them away as well at the mall.
Okay, so I'll do it so that I get
So,
the previous pickup.
well, whatever, but what we have to do is bring all the cookies here.
Yeah.
We're gonna put them in individual baggies
Okay,
and freeze them as in individual baggies, instead of that big giant container full of cookies.
so one bag, then one in my mouth.
Yes,
one
however
bag,
it works for
okay.
you, we're okay with that?
December
My
16th.
insulin just go.
So-
So we'll need lots of cookies.
Yeah, we're gonna need lots of cookies to give away, because we have hats and we have, pillows and toys and stuff like that, but, we wanna have, and we got some of those bags from NIH that we
You
can
trying to
give
give
away.
diabetes to my peoples?
Yes, I think there's some more in the garage that we've just brought. When we brought that food the other day, he didn't want that stuff, so
Okay.
we have some bags and stuff. Anyway, I believe NIH will call again before we go up there. So December 16th, and the good news is, the MoCo put out a note that, Wheaton Plaza was gonna close, and it was gonna be torn down and all that kind of stuff, and I spoke to the manager there today, and he said, no, that's not gonna happen. In fact, they're gonna redo the JCPenney side, and they've got a new exciting announcement to make in shortly, that they're gonna talk about what's gonna come in there, and they just brought in 3 new restaurants. So Wheaton Plaza is not closing, and they will be having a lot more stuff.
BJ's coming.
It's a Costco there already, so,
Yeah.
We're right across the street from each other, everywhere you go.
oh, really? I would like it if BJ went there, because we have a BJ membership, but we never use it.
Walmart would be nice.
Yeah, what, baby?
Walmart would be nice.
Walmart would be nice?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Everybody likes Walmart.
But, so.
Especially the
But
Globals.
Target is already there, so.
We don't like Target. We don't use Target.
But they fought so hard not to have Walmart come into that beautiful building, and now they're
Yeah.
raised and it's not there
There's so
now.
much crime that happens outside of Walmart. I've read a lot about it, and we live really close to one in Pensacola.
There's so much right.
Like, out the.
No, they vary a lot, because like the one near Fort Belvoir, that is crime rate, that's
Yeah.
just like every night.
Really?
However,
Not a good neighborhood.
the one near Fort Meade is awesome. It's just,
Yeah.
really nice.
Mount Airy's nice.
Let's drive all the way to Mount Airy to go to Walmart.
No, we usually go, I like
I'd
the
rather go to
one.
that one.
Germantown is fine, Laurel is fine during the
Laurel-
day.
in Laurel.
Yeah, that's the one,
Yeah, the
Laurel,
one-
that's the one I talked about.
Yeah, the Fort Meade one, yeah.
Days are getting shorter though.
Yeah. Well, here's
There's a
Peachy Town.
documentary about Walmart called The High Cost of Low Price.
Oh.
Very eye-opening.
Yeah, there's a website called Seen at Walmart, which I don't recommend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people with their
Yeah.
butt crack.
I mean, it's like if you go to Walmart and you see the most disgusting, ridiculous people there, and you take a picture of it, and you put it on the Seen at Walmart website. And, I mean, men wearing tutus and I can't even get into it.
That must be an urban thing, because,
No, it's not just urban, trust me.
because I was like, when I visit my relatives in Indiana, I mean, the Walmart there is really nice, but it's a tiny town now.
Yeah,
So
because
was the Walmart
it's
in
their main,
Alaska.
yeah, it's their main
But it's
source of,
Yeah.
you know, revenue and jobs and stuff, so they keep it nice, but in areas like ours where you have a billion stores every few feet,
Yeah, this is urban area.
I find colder areas are much more civilized when you go shopping.
yeah, cause people don't wanna hang out.
No, people have clothes on because it's cold.
Yeah, well, I don't know, I went to the Scene at Walmart website once or twice, and I mean, you just get lost in it, it's like going into what is,
Train wreck or something.
like the deep hole where Alice fell in or something in Wonderland, it's just scary, it's just really scary, but yeah, don't go there, I don't recommend it. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Don't go there.
Don't go there.
Don't go there.
Don't go there.
If you're depressed.
And if you do go there and you're dressed funny, I will take your picture and I will put it on the website. But it's just really scary. This weekend is third Shabbat, so it's International Night. I hope people are gonna make something and bring something interesting. I'm going to try some different things this weekend. I will make yucca, I promise. I even bought extra yucca today, so I'll make yucca for sure. I'm going to make what's called I made egg rolls this week, okay, and they were really good. But I don't want to have to wrap and fry egg rolls for the whole congregation because that's too many. And then some people ate like 6 of them, but Steve shall remain nameless. That was in one day. I mean, anyway, so I was looking online and I saw that I could make the filling and fry cut up the wrapping and fry the wrappers and then just mix them in there so it'd be like, it's called like an eggplant, or egg roll bowl.
Egg roll in a bowl.
Egg roll in a bowl, so you'll get that this weekend. I'm gonna make it with imitation crab meat. So, I used something not kosher for the ones I made this week, but we'll make it with kosher food. So I'm gonna make that, I'm gonna make yucca. What'd you say you were making?
Steak sandwiches.
Steak sandwiches? She's making, we got a bunch of that steakums. So we're gonna have the steak sandwiches. Anything else you know?
Hey, that is Homer Simpson up there.
I'm thinking Philly cheesesteak. Steak, remote.
Would you like cheese whiz on
whiz,
it?
yeah.
Ugh, God.
Fried onions.
I can't stand cheese whiz. Oh my
No.
God, that's nasty. No. But anyway, so if you have a specialty that you make from your country of origin, or for you few Americans that we do have your country of origin,
Region, yeah.
I'll bring some fried okra. I don't think we have any Southerners like
We
that.
had okra
They
the
sell
other
that
day.
at Walmart.
Peanut butter and jelly.
In the little kitchen.
Butter and
package,
jelly.
lots of hot dog.
Peanut butter and jelly.
I went to H Mart today and I forgot to get ginger. I'm so disappointed. I need ginger. Anyway, I'll go back tomorrow and get ginger.
Is that where you get your yucca?
It is.
Yeah.
Oh.
From H Mart. Trying to find a good coconut too, but they don't have, I can't tell if it's a good coconut because they're all in the green cover, and so I can't tell what's inside there. I don't know.
There's a guy in Bruce Mill that does things with coconuts, drinks and stuff.
I was gonna say, I don't know what he's doing with coconuts, but I don't wanna know either. He does things with coconuts. All right. That's scary. I know, it really does.
But this one on Georgia and Leahy only has like a little stand.
It's got a stand.
Yeah, but they just take the machete, chop it off for you to drink it. I want the coconut meat inside.
You can, I don't know, can you ask for it? I don't know. In Spanish, por favor.
I don't have a machete to cut it open.
A machete.
And last
Mine has it, you can bang them around too, you can put them.
well, no, but I mean, when we used to get the ones that were already out of the green shell, and they were just in the brown hairy coconut outside, I know how to do that.
My wife has taken this stuff out several times. I'm not quite sure how she does it, but she's from that part of the world, so she.
Okay, well, if your wife is a coconut expert, here's 2 things I'm looking for coconut.
Sure.
One, I'm looking for just regular coconut meat, so
The white stuff inside.
the white stuff inside. Secondly, there's at one point when it's seeding, it grows like a pillow of meat in there.
Yeah, it gets really thick.
Yeah, and it's like a big.
That's some kind of a stage it goes through.
Yeah, when it's seeding. So I'm trying to get that too, and they have it advertised even on Amazon that you can buy them that way, but then when I call the guy, he doesn't speak English, so I can't figure out what to do with
Did
him.
you say por favor?
No, he might be Spanish, he might be Indonesian or something, I don't know what he speaks. No, Philippines would speak English. But I don't know what he's saying and I can't figure it out, but it's a certain kind of, inside the coconut,
And since he knows exactly what he wants, it's inside
it
the
gels.
coconut. and
It's not the coconut goop, it's not,
Yeah, it's just white meat that's really thick.
yeah, it's like a big sponge or something of
I need to try
coconut.
that, and I hate coconut.
Yeah, well, eventually we'll figure it out.
And that's kind of an adventure thing, like you all talked about, these eggs
No, I never do eggs like
that
that,
have the chickens in them.
no.
Ew, yuck.
No, that's,
The balut, yeah.
that's a balut egg, and I wouldn't eat those. I eat a tarantula before I eat one of those.
Ugh, no. I still remember that video of those kids roasting the tarantulas and those little
Oh.
3-year-old kids eating the, the legs all over their faces, they're biting into the bellies, ugh.
Is that gonna be a video for Saturday?
No. Actually, your video for Saturday is gonna be a mission that you all did. I'm gonna show you 2 people that you gave gifts to on Saturday. I told you about December 16th, I told you about the food this weekend. Told you about the sermon, I had to cut part of it off
Oh, we
because
have fifth Shabbat at the end of the month.
we do have 5th Shabbat at the end of the month, so you'll talk to your sister?
Yeah, she's already got it on her.
Okay, and I'm gonna talk to, because Paula says she's not ready to be able to do all that yet.
No.
So I'm gonna talk to Roxanne and see if we can bring Roxanne back, for the foot massage part. And,
But you gotta tell her she can cut at, whatever, 10:30, wasn't she here till like midnight? or
Yeah,
something? Just-
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. it's like-
and I
so-
cut the last person, I
Right, and
just
she
told her,
worked all
no.
day that day, right?
not
Yeah.
And
down.
then she, yeah, it's like.
yeah,
not.
some people just don't know how to not take advantage of things. Who wanted to do nails?
I said I can do nails.
You can do nails? You wanna do nails? Or you said Ella or something, but Ella can't stay or something.
No. Can
Well,
you do-
no,
are
she
you
can
gonna
stay,
do-
we just have to move her
Are
phone.
you gonna do more than, are you gonna do more than 5 in an hour?
Should take it to my house.
We'll take her, we'll leave her phone at your house,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and she can come here, and then nobody will know what's going on, all the trackers won't be working there.
Yeah, we just need to have somebody do nails that does
Yeah,
more
but she
than one
does
nail
one
in 3
person.
hours,
There is
yeah.
no-
But then I said,
Yeah.
some people wants that.
I mean, she spends 3 hours on one person.
Yeah, that's not advantageous. We wanna make sure that many people, you know, the thing is that a lot of people are gonna get things, to experience things they'd never be able to afford outside of that. Okay, and I think that's really important, that we allow people, an opportunity to get something they couldn't afford to do, and, you know, I don't know, it just seems to me like it's a good thing that we have this community service night, and I
And we
know
hang
everybody
out.
loves it.
We hang out.
We hang out, you know, we fellowship, but everybody, I mean, people love the Beamer, people love the haircuts, people love the foot massage, people love all this stuff that's going on, so, I might do a class on flossing and dental hygiene. I'll show you how I brush my teeth, and you'll be like, damn, I ain't got all day.
I know.
One at a time?
No, we won't.
No, but my timer is to
We
get me
won't
to
have you
stop, not to
demonstrate
get me to
flossing.
keep going for 2 minutes.
We won't have you demonstrate flossing.
Now, you'll rip all your teeth out, that's not good. But,
Have a deal with one of
yeah, I take about 6 minutes to brush my teeth, so,
Yeah.
cause I can't stand a dirty mouth. Anyway, we'll do something
My
interesting.
mother uses hydrogen peroxide and baking, she outlines all of her teeth, and the dentist is like, your gums are so tight,
Mm.
and she's 80, whatever, and
Yeah.
the gums are like, cause she's doing, every night she does this process, I mean, I
Did
get tired
that-
of just thinking.
I don't have to do that process, but the dental hygienist said, man, your gums are just like the mannequin. Like, they don't bleed or anything. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
you'd have to stab me to get them
Yeah.
to bleed, because they won't bleed. But yeah, I have really, really good dental
But
hygiene.
they've also told you not to brush so hard.
Well, no, they told me not to brush so hard, but I don't brush hard, I just brush long.
Yeah.
But anyway, dental hygiene is important, because it can lead to heart attacks and other things if you're not flossing. And, you know, the dentist, the hygienist and I always have a laugh, because I tell her I floss, and she's like, yeah, I hear that all the time. I said, no, I really floss. It literally takes like 7 minutes to clean my mouth, that's how fast it goes. And I'm like, well, can't you polish them twice then, because you're done so quickly? No, I gotta get your wife back here. I'm like, all right. But, yeah, you wanna make sure you're flossing 2 and 3 times a day, every day. And you wanna,
Really? I thought it was just like one.
Oh my God, I floss 15, 20 times a day.
Like five.
I probably floss 6 times while you're sitting here. I carry the picks with me everywhere I go, and I floss constantly.
I stopped.
No, you gotta floss, it's very
And
important.
toothpicks are good too, I mean, because it's stimulating the area and picking out the.
Yeah, but you wanna get all that food out of there.
Yeah.
In Africa, was one place he didn't have the dental floss, so
Oh.
I said, oh, I got that, and he said, nope, because I used the double one. He refused to use the one I gave him, I said, no, I used the double one.
I know, she had little single ones, when they break and then they get stuck in your teeth. I actually have I had triples, they had triple ones, triple strings, I love them, and then they stopped making them, darn plackers. Anyway, anybody have anything? We hope, we keep Frida in your prayers, she's still apparently sick. And, Angie is completely sick,
Yeah.
she sounds like a 12-year-old boy going through puberty with her voice cracking all over the place and going hoarse. And Joyce is doing okay, but she's not strong enough to come out. She made that stuffed chicken last week, and everybody seemed to like her stuffed
Right.
chicken. But I think it really took a toll on her too. So I mean, if she wants to make something, I'm letting her do it, but I don't really want her to do it. Paul is doing much better, but she still says she's not ready for 5th Shabbat this month, but in December, I think there's another 5th Shabbat or something. Or January, something like that. Anyway. I'm sorry? Fountain, her back is really bothering her, and she's having some issues with her blood pressure.
Yeah.
So there's that.
She needs to come to Fish the Box so she can go and make her
Who is the lady who needs a job and her husband who needs to get better?
Oh,
Beth?
Beth?
Was that one of your guys' prayer requests? I don't know where that came from. We had to figure
She's
that out.
IT, Beth and, was it Roger?
Yeah, Beth and Roger. We've been praying for them for a long time, but I haven't gotten an update from anybody. I don't want to take them off if they still need the prayer, but they might have already been satisfied, and I don't know. So I thought maybe that was one of you guys.
Ulysses and Margarita Stony.
Ulysses and Margarita. Ulysses is doing better, but Margarita is really wanting to come back, and she can't until he gets a little bit better. So, Brandon's interview is Wednesday, right?
Yeah, no, he's already had it.
Oh, he did have it?
He's waiting, yeah.
Okay.
Felt it went well, but he's waiting.
Did he ever get a hold of that guy in Florida who does the same job?
He did get a hold of somebody.
Okay, good. All right. I can't think of anything else.
What about the other guy, Brandon, who's gonna preach for you?
Look, he works at a place where they just, I mean, he's in the Navy, and there's just, because he does communications and where he's stationed, he just can't get off. They have him working every weekend and stuff, so. Yeah, I think that's gonna be a nothing burger, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, he really wants to, and I really want him to, but because he can't say no to his job because he's in the military. It's not like he can just say, yeah, I need Saturdays off. Like, yeah, we'll tell you when you need Saturdays off. It'll be after you depart from the military. So I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But, all right. Anything else?
I have a praise report.
Okay.
I slept 7.5 hours last night.
Yay,
That's
good
a
for
lot, yeah.
you, yes.
Greg's not happy because I'm sleeping in the guest room now. I told him I gotta get everything straight, and then I can come back to our bed. I just been sleeping by myself. It's been really good.
That was kind of a weird praise, but okay. Greg, do you snore or something? Are you keeping her awake?
No, he doesn't. No, it's just I just had so many bad nights in that bed. I'm like, I'm going to.
Maybe it's the bed. Maybe you need a new bed.
I've switched mattresses, I've done lots of things.
So it's you.
Hey Amy, do you need an adjustable bed that raises up and down?
I don't know. I mean, I'm in a black room now. We have light blocked out, but we do that in our room too.
Maybe you should get the next hospital bed that comes around.
So I was having trouble too, and we got this noisemaker. It's a little box. and it's
White
like-
noise?
White noise, yeah, and it's helped me, because I guess I'm a light sleeper when he comes up. I go to bed first, and then, but it's helped so much.
Don't they
I
give you
sleep
those
so
on
much
some
better.
phones? Because there's always these advertising
Yeah, you
that
can
this
get
noise
a
can give
brown
you
noise,
that.
white noise, green noise, whatever noise. Yeah, some people need to have that white noise going on. Our daughter sleeps with one of those. I never
YouTube
understood.
has that stuff on there, you can always grab.
I have my
whatever
own.
Noise you want color-wise.
Yeah, I have my own little noisemaker. Sometimes I'm not sure, I'm like, wait, what is that noise? Oh, that's her again, okay. She makes a lot of different noises all night long. All right. Okay, I can't think of anything else. Just remember December 16th, put it on your calendar. We'll meet up at the mall. I'll need probably, well, I have Steve here, a couple people to put the stuff in the truck, but we can, because we're gonna need a table and all those cookies and everything, we're gonna have to get them in there, okay? Oh, anything else? Okay. I can't think of anything else. Rick? Al?
Margaret and Margaret said, Al.
Yeah, he wasn't here Saturday.
Yeah. He wasn't here for a couple Saturdays because his brother-in-law was with them, and he doesn't believe in anything, so he didn't want to come to services. So Al stayed with him, and she brought the sisters, and she told me that the sisters, on Saturday, she said that they got back safely.
Yeah.
So that was good. We prayed for them to have safe travel when they got back. As far as I know, Al's okay. I mean, I haven't heard anything about that.
Where were they from again, California?
Yeah, California. I think, well, one was from California and one was from someplace else. Arizona, yeah.
Does anybody know if they ever convinced the one that's here, the other sister, to meet up with them as well, or? Because she was not willing to,
Yeah,
meet with
I don't
them.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird that
We prayed
they're
about
all from China and they're all here. Yeah. It's like, I thought you couldn't get out of
From
China.
Hong Kong. not
Apparently, a lot of
China.
people can get out of China.
Hong Kong was open for a while for people to get out.
Mm.
You
All
guys
right.
say something about Rick?
Yeah, Rick and his daughter Danielle said, Danielle said they would do a worship night for us. So I'm gonna find another Tuesday night because we already have people coming on Tuesday, so we'll have a Tuesday night worship concert sometime. But she didn't give me a date, she just said she would come and she would sing for everybody. And they'll put on a mini concert.
I haven't seen her since she was
Little.
4 years old.
Yeah, and if I'll find out how long they are willing to play, and if they're only going to do 30 minutes, then I'll also ask Carmen to come and do a set, or I'll ask Ricardo or Carlos, yeah, to come and do a set too. So, because I know you guys want like at least an hour of music, so, and I kind of like it when there's different people playing too, you know, it's kind of nice. So anyway, yeah, that's the Rick news. I can't remember what else I had to tell you, but that's okay. I'm getting old. I need ginger.
Great.
Okay. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time to study your word and to study, Father, together as a group and to share the fellowship, the love, the friendship in this room. Father, we thank you for these who are dedicated to their faith, dedicated to learning and growing and maturing in faith. Father, we pray that as we go through these difficult things in the scriptures, Lord, that we understand them in such a way that we can clarify them to others who are not understanding them. And that, Father, in the name of Yeshua, you give us the opportunity and the ability to remember all the things that we learn and we study, that the Holy Spirit diligently brings them back to our memory. You say, don't worry about what you'll say, for the Holy Spirit will speak for you. So, Father, let us yield to the Spirit at all times as we yield to you in obedience, love, and faithfulness. We thank you, Lord, as you protect these as they go. In the precious name of Yeshua. Amen.
Amen.
All right, YouTube, we'll see you Saturday night, 6 p.m. Be here or be square.
Anybody need a cork
She
board?
fell
Help
asleep.
yourself.
Yes, take the extra
Cork board.
food, and you got a cork board, you got other stuff over there?
And there's a plastic shelf too that I took apart.